Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you may be tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. You know, we just enjoy bringing these podcasts to all the listeners, especially those young people that are involved in ag science and agricultural education and FFA, and all of our teachers, all of those sponsors, stakeholders. We enjoy bringing subject matter experts to the table. We enjoy bringing people that share their insights, their wisdom, their expertise, experiences, and today is no different. We've got a special guest today. We have the president and CEO of the International Association of Fairs and Expositions, the IAFE, Marla Calico. Marla, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here. As always, I enjoy talking with you and talking about opportunities for students as well as stakeholders.
I will tell you that that feeling is mutual, and there's a lot of people that come across our paths in life, and you just thank the good Lord. You say, you know what, I appreciate that one. And Marla is one of those that has crossed paths with myself and Texas FFA, Texas Ag Science Education. And it's been a great relationship. And Marla, I appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So every podcast, we start off with the same question. And that is this, Marla, what are you grateful for today?
Well, today, like every day, I am grateful for the opportunity to work within an industry and with people that I believe are absolutely not only the salt of the earth, but absolutely the best in the world. The people who run county fairs and state fairs and agricultural exhibitions across the world are truly passionate about what they do. There's no room for mediocrity. They love what they do. They want to learn how to improve that. And I get to be a part of that every day and interacting with them in so many different ways. It's just really fabulous. And so I am truly grateful for that every day of my life.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I love the IFA. I love the people. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. I love their resiliency. I love their passion. I love their heart. And I agree with you, Marla. I think that, you know, the people that we work with, the missions that we get to be associated with, when you reflect on those, you are grateful. And in spite of all the things that could be distractions in our world, the news, social media, there are so many positive things when we just look around at what's closest to us that can give us energy, give us hope, and rekindle our passion. And so I agree with you about those things that are closest to us and those missions we get to serve. I know it is for me anyway. So.
Well, no, it truly is. And I think about, you know, when you think about, and especially let's think about students when they're faced with that decision of what are you going to do with the rest of your life. And there are all sorts of things that come into play. And I think right off the bat, most of us have a tendency to think about the economic implications of our choice. And certainly that has to come into play. But truly, your life is blessed when every day you get up and you enjoy the job, the work that you do, when it gives you more than just a paycheck. And so for that, you know, it makes this even more meaningful. And I wish for every person, every human being, that they could work in an opportunity that they have that type of feeling rather than just doing it for a paycheck.
You know what? So that was what she said, what Marla said. If you ever get a chance to come to the great state of Texas, for the listeners that might be out of state, or learn a little bit more about our programming, we have a program in the summertime that we do where we put 36 teachers on a bus. We take them about 1,000 miles across the state of Texas. We'll visit about 15 locations. They'll hear from about 70 presenters. And we have been so fortunate that Marla has joined us for a couple of those trips. And as a result, we have our own Marla Calico fan club in the state of Texas. And our ag teachers just really appreciate the professionalism, the insight, the encouragement that Marla has given. Marla carries a great responsibility. If you listen to her introduction, it's not just a domestic responsibility, it's an international responsibility. And it's one that goes all the way down to the community level, but it also has national and international implications. Marla didn't just fall into that seat. Something tells me there was a path that led her to this leadership role that she carries. And so, Marla, would you kind of walk us through your life story and how you ended up at the IAFE?
Well, let's see. We don't have all day long, so I'll try to do the condensed version of it. But it was a circuitous path. It was a path of not following what I thought was intended for me, but happening into something that became my life's work. And a long story, very long story short, when I was a senior in high school, I had a path in front of me, and that was in music. I had multiple scholarships to attend universities to further my studies in music and music performance. And something came over me that I just didn't feel like it was the right path. And so I was wandering into my second love, which was, I thought, to be medicine. And I'm going to tell you, Aaron, I encourage anyone who ever thinks about working in medicine, go work in it before you dedicate learning more about it. I spent 13 months working in a hospital. I learned so much about life and death and the fact that I couldn't do that for the rest of my life. So fast forward, I'm a year after all of my peers graduating from high school. I have no college scholarships. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I ended up in an undecided path at Southwest Missouri State University, which is now Missouri State University. And so happened my second semester, I was looking for a summer job, and I was hoping to be a camp counselor at a 4-H camp, but found out from my youth extension agent that they weren't going to be doing camp full time. It was just one. And he referred me to the Ozark Empire Fair, which happens to be the second largest fair in the state of Missouri, one of the top 100 fairs in the United States, which just happened to be hiring some people in a part-time role to work in the livestock department. And I had this edge up because I had shown Holstein cattle. I'd been involved in both 4-H and FFA. I'd clerked at my local county fair. So I got a job working part-time, and that opened up my eyes to a world of possibility of working in the agricultural fair industry. I was so fortunate. It took me 8 years to get my college degree because I was working full time and paying for every cent of it as I went. And so I was able to spend nearly 30 years at the Ozark Empire Fair, starting as a part-time agricultural clerk, spending my last 10 years as the CEO of that organization, which at the time was about a $3 million a year annual revenue organization, again, one of the top 100 fairs in the United States. And my last year there, I was elected to be the chair of the board of the International Association of Fairs and Expositions, the IAFE. And I'd had an opportunity for almost 10 years prior to that to be traveling across North America, speaking on behalf of the IAFE on various topics. And so I knew fair folk from literally every state in the United States and almost every province in Canada. And so it became a natural. After I had served as chair, I had a brief hiatus in a private sector for about 2 years, and an opportunity opened up at the IAFE office as director of education. And so I've had the fortunate position of being a part of that team since September of 2006 and the CEO since January of 2016.
What a story. And not just that pathway to the career, but I could imagine you could write a book on all of the experiences, the victories, the heartbreaks, the inspiration, all of the things that that we know happens through this fair and expo experience.
Yeah, and again, there's so many lessons that I learned along the way, and very fortunate that I had a couple of mentors in the business. Aaron, and you may have heard, I can't remember this speaker, I heard him one time, and he said, well, in the midst of a keynote, he goes, think about the 5 people who have influenced your life the most, besides your parents, and go home and write a note to them. And I thought about those 5, and 2 of those mentors changed my life forever. And, I was fortunate when you get a chance to work with someone who gives you every opportunity but becomes your safety net if you fail, and helps you rise again. And I had mentors exactly like that. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without those. And so having the opportunity to fail and learn from your mistakes and figure out how to go ahead farther, faster, that's all part of it. And certainly you've got to have helpers along the way. So find the helpers.
See, that's why I like just talking to you. I tell people all the time, if you'll just let people tell you their story, there are these incredible apples of gold. Because what happens, I think, when we share our story is I think those high points are what we reference. We reference those moments that somebody encouraged us or counseled us or corrected us, but did it in a way where it wasn't a gotcha.
Exactly.
They did it in a way where it was genuinely authentic. And, that's what I love about doing these podcasts, because again, listeners, if we just do our job and listen, we're going to find all of these little apples, these leadership traits, these, I call them apples of gold, these little seeds for greatness. And by the way, that's what the podcast is about, growing our future. If you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, how do you grow it? You got to plant the seeds. You got to nurture them. You got to take care of them. And that's kind of what you do. Marla, I remember our paths crossed. I just want to reference this for everybody because it's a leadership trait. Okay. So number one, everybody that knows me knows I'm a big live your brand, live your brand, live your brand. I'm a firm believer that you live your brand, You live your brand by what you put on social media. You live your brand on how you communicate, how you're perceived. Okay. So I'm a big proponent of live your brand. Well, as a result, one of my board members put me up for an award, and I got this award. And all of a sudden, I get this phone call from Marla Calico at the IAFE, and I have no idea what this is. I didn't know what to expect. And she wanted me to serve on a panel at their international convention out in Las Vegas. And the more I dug and got into the research, I thought, this is going to be interesting, because expos and fairs were a big part of my life. I learned a lot of life lessons there. I learned how to be resilient. I remember getting the gate one time with my stick. Oh, yeah. I also remember the pats on the back when I was a grand champion with my lamb or my pig. And there was so much that came from that experience. But because Marla picked up the phone and called, my family, we've been blessed, because now I've had the pleasure of going coast to coast. I've been from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I've got to visit these state fair associations and see firsthand what's going on. The learning that goes on there of just what's germane to Arizona is a lot different than Maine. The core values are the same, but the agriculture is different. The community's different. The engagement looks a little bit different. But that's one of the things that Marla, our relationship, she has blessed me with, and I appreciate it, because those insights I'm then allowed to bring back to Texas, and I'm allowed to share those with our members and with our ag teachers. And Marla, it's like your willingness when people call on you, just like this podcast, your willingness to share. How important is it, this giving back thing?
Oh. It is absolutely at the top of the pile, right? If you think about your responsibilities, I want to say when you're an adult, okay? Because whenever, when you're in high school, you're in college, you're learning, you're still learning. You have a responsibility to be true to yourself. You have a responsibility to be true to others, always honor your word. But when you're an adult, you have a position, responsibility to lead. You have an opportunity, a responsibility to set the example of what those around you could be, should be, can aspire to be. So I think it's absolutely imperative that you give back. I spend, and you know this, but I spend nearly half the year on the road. And that's a hard lifestyle, but it is my life. People say, how do you do it? And well, it's because that's what your job is. And if your job is to get on a plane and spend all day traveling to the New Brunswick Association of Agricultural Fairs, where all 13 fairs have representation, and you get to break bread with them, you share what you know, you listen to them, you find out what their issues are, that's giving back. And so unfortunate that's what my job is. But giving back in whatever way we can to share life lessons that we've learned, to give somebody a hand up by maybe giving them an introduction to a job, by giving them an opportunity to spread their wings. I just think it's part of what we must do as leaders.
I agree completely again. Um, Marla, when we talk about opportunities, I think that one of the things that really became clear to me is, and I'm hoping that our teachers and our students are really listening to what we're about to talk about here. One of the things that became really clear to me are all the incredible opportunities in the fairs and expo business. And it's not just what you might see in the livestock area. There is a plethora of opportunities to be involved in the fairs and expo business. Could you kind of give us a little bit of a snapshot of the scope of all of the things that people could get involved in?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Depending upon the size of the fair, from a volunteer run to the largest, actually largest events in the world, there are common elements, right? If you're going to put on an event for the public, you got to have somebody that understands marketing, who can communicate the proposition here, right? You know, whether it's buy one, get one free, come to see Garth Brooks in the grandstand, whatever it is, you've got to have a marketing expert. And that marketing is even further segmented. Now you need digital media experts, because when I was in the day, I needed to know how to write a good radio copy or, you know, help design a good newspaper ad. But now it's all about social media and how you monitor that. You get new audiences. You need somebody who obviously understands agriculture and understands the importance of that. So whether it's the show ring or special exhibits or education, competitive exhibits, the arts and crafts and quilts and cookies, those are an important part. You need business folks, right, that understand partnerships and relationships, whether that's selling a sponsorship so that a business could have greater exposure, whether it's the interactions with the carnival operators, commercial exhibitors where you're getting it. You know, some fairs have they literally have a CFO, a chief financial officer, right? The larger opportunities, they're going to have a human resources specialist. Then the other aspect, besides that annual fair or exposition that's put on, most fairgrounds, particularly across North America, their fairgrounds facilities have to be utilized for other events. It's a business. And so we often talk about, for many of our member fairs, they have 3 business units. They have the annual fair, which in most instances is the single largest source of income. But then to make sure they have the revenues to support that, they all, and keep a year-round staff in many instances, they have what we call non-fair revenue or non-fair rental business. And so, for example, at the fair that I operated, we had as many as 150 other events taking place at our fairgrounds throughout the year. We could have a horse show, a cattle sale, a dog show, and a grocery show going on all at the same time in our complex. So that takes people who are event specialists, who are operations and logistics specialists, and salespeople as well. And then the third piece of business, many fairs today are now understanding that they have the expertise in-house and the facilities to create other events that support their mission, other events that just may prove a revenue stream. And so it's everything from Christmas and holiday, Halloween shows, spring festivals, harvest festivals. There's all sorts of that. So there's so many opportunities, but there's one other that I want to make sure that everybody understands. There's an opportunity to serve, no matter what your job is in life, at probably your local county fair or show, because the majority are run by volunteers. And every volunteer county fair board, they need experts in everything. They need the lawyer, they need the banker, they need the person who understands retail, they need the social media expert. So even if the fair is small and totally run by volunteers, there is a place for everyone in the community to get involved and serve, because the fairs that thrive have a leadership, a governing body that has all of those fields represented around the board table. You cannot have a county fair board that's all livestock or all of, call it what, food concessions. You can't do just one. It takes all of that to make it successful.
Well, it is. And that's, you kind of touched on exactly what I wanted you to. And that is, when you look at the scope of fairs and expos, if I'm a young person, I love what Marla just said. If you're a young person, look at volunteering. Okay, so yeah, you might go stock show, but after you're done stock showing, take an opportunity to say, listen, I want to volunteer in the petting zoo, or I want to help, give tours or do ag experiences. but help the fair by staying involved and staying connected. Also stretch yourself. I would say professionally stretch yourself. Go pick up a volunteer opportunity, maybe outside of an area that you have an expertise in that you want to learn about. Do some job shadowing. I mean, I think, Marla, I don't know how accessible that could be, but I'm going to tell you, if I was a young person, I might call the head of the local fair and say, hey, would you mind if I came and just job shadowed you for a day?
Well,
just watch, just to see how you make decisions, who you get input from, all the things that you just described, Marla.
Absolutely. And every fair I know of, if someone called up and said, I'd like to volunteer, I'd like to help, I'd like to know more, they're going to welcome you with open arms. I'm not sure in Texas how many fairs do this, but across the country, a large number of fairs will have actively meeting and working as part of the fair, a junior fair board. For example, there's a fair in Western Washington. They selected by all of the high schools within their county. They have an opportunity to put 2 or 3 representatives on this board. For others, it's a matter of just volunteering and getting involved. And we see that as a really up and coming, more prevalent model of the way you grow your future leaders for your fair. You bring them in, you get them excited, you take advantage of that energy and expertise, and then also let them learn. A quick story, I was visiting some fairs up and down the East Coast in 2019, and my last fair visit was a tiny, tiny county fair just outside of Rochester, New York. And so I had let the volunteer fair manager know I was coming via email. I show up, and I went to the office, and they said, oh, Sue, fair board president, I'm sorry, she's not available today. And I said, what? But she's expecting me. She goes, oh, but our junior fair board chair is running the show today. And so basically, one day out of the fair board president handed over her keys and her cell phone and her two-way radio and said, now you take care of it. And it was a great way to throw somebody. Of course, I did get to meet the fair board president, but it was that young person, that young lady that was running the show that day.
Wow, that is a great idea.
I thought it was fabulous.
We had a deal one time. I don't mind sharing this because I thought it was such a clever idea. But we had a local school down in the Austin area that every Groundhog Day, every February 2nd on Groundhog Day, they do job shadowing, and they send their seniors out to job shadow companies.
Yeah.
I thought that's genius. And
absolutely,
I love that not only did they gave them the keys and the walkie-talkie and everything.
It's great. And so, I think across, at least in our industry, I think we have this active movement to grow our future leaders. It's absolutely imperative that we do that. And so I'm really proud of what fairs across the globe are doing in that respect.
Well, I want to share something else here that I've learned about fairs and expos, Marla, that I'm very appreciative of. And I think you guys deserve to get some recognition for this. I think there's a lot of people that don't really understand. I think we all get kind of stereotyped, and we get painted with this one brush, and we're not afraid of our brands. We're obviously very proud of our brands and what we do for families and communities. But one of the things that I really like about fairs and expos is the fact that y'all's grounds, that your facilities become a safe place in times of emergency, in times of chaos. And I don't think a lot of times people take the time to notice that, just the significance of that role that y'all play.
Yeah, it's actually timely that you mention that. As we're recording this, another hurricane is hitting another part of the United States, and county fairgrounds are called into action. They are called into action. I can tell you countless stories, particularly in Florida when it's hurricane season. Every fairground has an agreement to serve in some capacity. At the South Florida Fair, they are the emergency shelter for the medically needy. They're set up with cots. They have everything, the emergency power to take care of those people that need, for example, oxygen or need to have medical attendance. Almost every fairground serves as a staging ground for Florida Power and Light. And in fact, after Hurricane Ian, there were literally thousands and thousands of people involved with utility crews from across the United States. And guess what? They not only took their trucks and equipment to the fairgrounds, they were staying in fairgrounds buildings. They were being fed by fairgrounds staff or local community. In the West, most fairgrounds are used for emergency fire staging, the terrible situation that we find our times in. So all across the Western United States, from the Rockies on, they serve as fire shelters, temporary cooling, temporary heating. During the early days of the pandemic, facilities were deployed for testing, then for vaccination, for storage of PPE. It is such a fact that the United States Department of Homeland Security considers county fairgrounds, state fairgrounds as critical commercial infrastructure. I have regular communication with the DHS because we know in times of emergency, fairgrounds are designed to hold people, large, vast quantities of people, and have the infrastructure. Additionally, they have the unique skill set. If there are animals involved, they have the appropriate housing for animals. Think about all of those horse stalls and cattle stalls and pig pens and sheep pens. And they have volunteers who understand it. So whether it's in San Diego County and volunteers of that fair rush in to help and take care of the actual animals that have been moved there, or in all parts of the United States, in Florida, Hurricane Ian ravaged situations with horses. And so fairgrounds are uniquely positioned to serve their communities in that capacity.
Well, you shared exactly what I was hoping you would, and that's one of those little hidden jewels that I think sometimes we probably don't tell that story enough. It is just how valuable your role is in communities in times of need. Accessibility and the values behind that, which is really a great transition to what I want to talk about next. So they say when your values are clear, your choices are easy. So when your values are clear, you make those choices to serve your community, to step up and let your staff say, hey, we're going to help in a time of need. But also, I think it's incumbent upon us also as adults and as students to also practice those same core values in best practices. Because when we don't practice those best practices, we could come under attack from interest groups that may not understand what we do. And they like to thrive on those negativities of when we don't practice those things appropriately. Marla, how important is it that students and teachers really embrace best practices and ethical management? From your seat, how important is that?
It's absolutely critical. It's essential. It starts with personal integrity and honesty, being true to your word. Talk about a life lesson. When you don't do what you said you were going to do, and dad says, no, yes, you are, because you will always be true to your word. You can lose everything in the world, but if you lose your word, if you lose the ability for people to have trust and faith in you, you've lost everything. So living your life with integrity and honesty is absolutely critical. When we think about the greater business sense, how we deal with others in business, that level playing field, being fair to everyone that we are involved with, treating others the same, golden rule, always right there. When we add into that the fact that, particularly in our business, we're dealing with people and animals in the same space, and we are facing a society that looks now at animals differently than they did perhaps when I was growing up, and certainly when my grandparents, my great-grandparents were growing up. So we have to say, how are we showcasing this important segment of agriculture? And are we encouraging our youth exhibitors, for example, to always be ethical in the way that they treat those animals? It's not just about being humane, but it's also ethical. And it's being, it's treating other human beings and other living beings with compassion and fairness. And so I think those types of things, Aaron, I've always said, I have to be able to get up every morning and look myself flat out in the mirror and say, did you do what you said you were going to do? Did you honor your word? And can you live with the actions that you've taken? And I think we have to do that every single day in everything that we do.
Well, I appreciate that, Marla, on a lot of fronts. Abraham Lincoln, there's a quote that they attribute to Abraham Lincoln. He said that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will become the philosophy of government in the next.
Mm.
And the reason that's important is exactly what you just described, because we don't want young people to think that they can wire around the box. We don't want young people to risk something that's in the food chain. We don't want them to misrepresent something or to be characterized as an abuser or as somebody that doesn't really, take care of that living thing that's in their possession. And so your words of wisdom there, the integrity, your brand, who you are, it is important for young people to embrace that now, because you sure don't want to be down the road and think that those same kind of concepts that you might have thought were okay to get away with as an exhibitor are okay in business. Because as you get out in the real world, those things could end you up in some significant trouble.
And I can tell you that from a
Yeah.
perspective of having been in the seat again at a large regional fair with exhibitors of all types from all across for nearly 29 years. And I'm going to guarantee you that when my early days, when I was just the livestock clerk, if I ran across somebody who was cheating and I later met them in their life 20 years down the road, as I did when their kids began to show and they were in business, if I knew they were a cheater in the livestock show, I wouldn't do business with them. I just couldn't. I could not do that, because if they could cheat with their animals, if they could do what was unethical at that time and try to get around the rules, then is that someone I really want to do business with? So I had that real opportunity to watch what happens. But I think more important than that, it's the fact that as an individual, we have to respect and understand that to have faith in another human being and to honor that person with their word and your word in exchange is absolutely, it's absolutely essential. We have to have integrity, and that involves being honest in everything we do.
Well, you again, I'll say it one more time. I know there's a lot of FFA members, 4-H, ag science teachers, and extension agents, and we talk about how much we love the FFA and how much we love the 4-H. When our values are clear, our choices should be easy. And so we have to maintain the integrity of these great brands that we get to be associated with. And it's not just the brands because they're the FFA or the 4-H. It's exactly what Marla just said. It's because it's your brand. It's your personal brand. And it's something that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. So you said that very well, Marla. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about advocacy. I think, and you mentioned social media, I think there's an opportunity here when we think of, there's a term called micro influencers. We may not have big brands and we may not have big influencers, but when you collectively look at all 4-H and FFA members, ag science teachers, extension agents, people that are stakeholders and involved, we definitely are micro influencers. We're definitely sharing what it is to raise and grow food, fiber, animal protein. I mean, we have that opportunity. How important is advocacy, do you see, as us sharing the good side and the ethical side and the best practices side of what we do?
Oh, I think it's critical. If you're going to be involved in agriculture in any way today, you have an opportunity to shed light on what is the reality, but also the best practices that it takes. I learned very early on in my life. I grew up on a dairy farm, and my responsibility when I was 12 years old was to take care of all the baby calves. And believe me, when you're 14 years old and you have 120 baby calves you have to bottle feed twice a day, it's an awesome responsibility. And in the summertime, I wanted to be anywhere else but in that calf barn. But my dad impressed upon me that our livelihood depended upon those calves being healthy, being raised to their ultimate purpose. And so I think we have to shed a light on the fact that we care, that we would not abuse our animals in any way because they are our livelihood, right? And if you are in animal agriculture in particular, if you are raising crops, I think we have to show that we're good stewards of the land and that we're doing everything within our power not to damage the environment, because we know if we damage the environment, we don't have the crop production and therefore we lose our livelihood. So I think it's ever important today, when there are significant social forces who are determined for philosophical reasons to destroy agriculture. We have an opportunity, obligation to always be advocates in everything that we do, to be honest, and to live what we believe is an honest way of agriculture, and share that story, and find ways to use the right words to understand what type of messages are going to come across. The big challenge is that many who are opposed to agriculture are against the use of animals whatsoever, and so we have to be careful in what we say and how we say that. But we do have an opportunity that I think will help position agriculture for the future.
I'm not going to get into an advocacy workshop here, but I am going to say something based on what Marla just said. And Marla's heard me say this before, but one of the things that we need to always be aware of is that 73% of Americans see a cat or a dog every single day. Now let that sink in. 73% of the population sees a cat or a dog every single day. If you just simply Google cats and dogs, the images that pop up, are very loving, they're very caring. And then when we think about agriculture and we think about livestock production or crop production, if we're not careful, we sometimes put up images that the public may not understand. It's called emotional intelligence. And so to Marla's point, we have to be smart about the way that we advocate for our world of livestock production and crop production, because we want to demonstrate best practices. We want to demonstrate humane methods. We want to demonstrate all the good that we do, not just the fact that we've got a blue ribbon, not just the fact that we're a champion. That's a good thing, but there's a lot of care that goes on behind that blue ribbon that we ought to be demonstrating too, because that is the care that we know our kids and adults are giving, that sometimes the public doesn't always get to see in the championship photo. So that's the reason why I wanted to reference the advocacy side. The other thing that I would say about advocacy, Marla, and I would be curious your thoughts. I like to tell the kids and the teachers in Texas, you can't just say that you're an advocate because you're on social media or that you're giving public speeches. I think advocacy also means that you have to understand how your government operates. You have to understand how policy is made, because how can you say that you're an advocate if you don't know who represents you, if you don't know what bills are being offered and how they're, what committees they're in and who's supporting them, who's against them. Advocacy to me includes that element of being an involved citizen. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's ever more important today. Each of us, as a citizen of the world, regardless of where we live, we have to educate ourselves, and we have to educate ourselves in a way that is balanced and to get as much information as possible. We live in a culture of split decision, where 10 seconds of a message has a tendency to influence. And unfortunately, most of us live in an echo chamber, particularly in social media. We only see what we want to see. We do not see balanced opinions. And so I think we have to be very, very intentional in looking at an issue, looking at a situation, looking at people who are destined to be those people making rules and laws, and understand more about the process and thoroughly understand what's at stake. So it starts obviously at the local community level, but it goes all the way up to our federal level. And we need to understand how government works, our role, and take that role very seriously.
Thank you. I agree with you completely. I love the fact that we live in this incredible democracy, that we are part of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but that we, the people, we've got to be smart, and we've got to be involved, and we've got to care enough to know what's going on. And not let somebody else make a decision for us. We need to be the ones that are involved. And especially when it comes to agriculture, because there's not a lot of us out there, and we need to make sure we're at the table and that we're part of the dialogue, so that the folks that don't understand what we do get to know us as individuals. And they what is it? Zig Ziglar always said, if they know you, they'll listen to you, but if they trust you, they'll do business with you. Mm-hmm. We want to be involved so we can create relationships of trust. And by the way, Marla, you know, during the pandemic, I thought this was interesting. During the pandemic, for the first time in Gallup polling history, in the history of Gallup polling, farmers and ranchers and agriculture became the #1 most respected industry in America. And I think that the supply chain issues, the panic that people saw by not having the choices, we had plenty of food, but they didn't have the choices that they were accustomed to. It really brought light to the fact that what we do in raising food is an important component of our society. But
absolutely,
we got to be advocates for that. I don't want to go all the way back and relive the past, but I do want to share something about Marla and Fair Strong. I remember the Dallas host committee. We were meeting in Dallas for Tom Ziegler. Zig Ziglar's son was the chairman of the Dallas host committee, and we were meeting for the annual Texas FFA convention. We're preparing for convention. We're in this room. We got the CEO of La Quinta, and we got BAS. We got all these great stakeholders in the room, and we had some former FFA members in the room. And all of a sudden, almost like somebody flipped on a light switch, you could hear phones vibrating and going off all at the same time. And we actually paused the meeting and said, is there an Amber Alert? Is there something going on? And it was the announcement that the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo had just canceled the Livestock Show and Rodeo in light of the pandemic. And I remember we were all just stunned. It was just a moment that we knew that this iconic show, when they say they've canceled, you know there is something significant going on. And I'll never forget, I left that meeting that day, and Marla Calico was the first phone call I made. And I said, Marla, I need your insight. This is, by the way, this is an example of mentors and professional networks. And I said, Marla, is this real? And I still get goosebumps to this day when Marla Calico told me, she said, hang on to your hat. And she said, the next 72 hours is going to be very telling. And she was not lying. What happened through the pandemic really put a stress on the fairs and expos. But it's just like agriculture. You got to learn to be resilient. And I am so proud of Marla's leadership, the leadership of all of the staff at the IAFE, the leadership of all the state associations, all the way down to the county levels. They weathered that storm. As brutal as it was, they weathered it, and they have brought back to our local communities this incredible experience called fairs and expos. So Marla, I just wanted to brag on y'all's resiliency. I wanted to brag on your fair, strong mentality, and the fact that y'all hung tough. And guess what? We've got fairs and expos again today.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I nearly chose our standard fair, strong background for my virtual background today, because every time I see it, it has the letters #FairStrong, which became our social media, and still today, our social media tag and everything that we do. But the background is individual faces taken. It's a collage of fair people and talking about their fairs, doing everything they can about their fairs. And it's this collage of hundreds upon hundreds of tiny images that make up the background, an iconic image of our industry. And that individual resiliency, the collective resiliency to not let this get us down, to figure out a way to live and survive for another day, was absolutely phenomenal. I can say that none of our members went out of business. Now, were they hanging on by a thread if they didn't have a fair for 2 years? Yes. Yes. Was it difficult? Yes. Was it incredibly difficult? But not a single fair went out of business. And
Wow.
That's incredible, because I hope people understand The
Wow.
majority of fairs across the United States are private entities. They're not supported by taxpayer dollars. And so it makes it even more impressive, I think, when you talk about the resiliency, the willingness to do whatever it takes to keep this community tradition alive.
And that's what I like what you just said, is that people need to understand it's not just that we go stock show. It's that families come and visit. They bring generations, grandparents. I mean, that's the beauty of the stock shows. And Marla, you said something. I want to share one more thing. And I think I've shared this with you before, but I'm going to share it one more time in light of what you just shared. One of our sponsors is Wyndham La Quinta Hotels. And my contact, Jake Payne there, we get together on a quarterly basis and we kind of review how we're doing. And I remember, when back in 2008, when the market really took a dive, and I remember Jake said, "Yeah, you're down." And I'm like, "Oh man, that's terrible. We're going to work hard. We're going to see what we can do." And he goes, "Aaron, wait a second." He goes, "Y'all are only down like 6%. He goes, "The closest competitor to y'all is down like 26%. And I remember I couldn't understand that. He said, "Aaron, y'all are almost recession proof. You're almost recession proof." And that really got my attention. So I went to another one of my mentors, Kathy Cornett, who is the owner of one of the largest ag marketing companies in the world, the McCormick Company, who's another one of my mentors, by the way, Marla. And I asked Kathy, I said, Jake said we're almost recession proof. And that really got my attention. And I loved her response. She said, "Aaron, when times get tough, do your kids still show?" And I said, "Well, yes." I said, "We may cut back in something else because we know the importance of our kids to have that experience." And Marla, I think, go back to what we said, when your values are clear, your choices are easy. I think that communities, fairs, and expos, we made it through that hard time because we realized that it's still important that we do this.
Without a doubt. I had just a recent opportunity to address a state meeting, and I'm getting ready to do so again in another few weeks. And the theme that I'm using for these is that fairs change lives. And I believe wholeheartedly that what we do, I listened to you earlier talking about what a difference it made for you to have the opportunity to win and to lose in the show ring, and what you learn taking care of the animals. And it goes far beyond that. We change lives every single day, everywhere, in multiple ways. And it's my job to celebrate that, but it's also my job to remind all of the volunteers and the professionals in the fair industry to take that responsibility seriously, that what you do matters, and that what you do truly does change lives.
Well, I'm always listening to these podcasts and think, what are we going to title this one? Thank you. I know what we're going to title this one. Fairs change lives.
There's a hashtag for that too.
Really good. All right, Marla, real quick, give me 3 leadership tips. If we were going to give FFA kids, ag science teachers, to hear 3 tips that'll help improve your position, your competitive edge, your marketability, what are they? What would you say are 3 leadership tips?
Personal integrity. You have to have it. Always be honest in what you do and treat others with fairness. The second one would be to learn from your mistakes, because you will make them. Cherish your mistakes. There's something to be learned from that. We can't always win every single time. I remember that white ribbon in the show ring, right? And that when it looks like there's no possible way ahead, look for another way, because there is always another way. Whether you climb over that rock, go around the rock, take a detour tunnel under the rock, or just blast the thing, there's always another way. Just stick with it.
That's awesome. Stick with it. Well, Marla, I appreciate you spending time with us today. I know that we could keep talking. Every time I'm around Marla, we have to both look at our watch and say, we got to go. But we do appreciate the fact that you have, in the world of philanthropy, we say that there are 4 T's: time, talent, treasure, and testimony. And we appreciate the fact, Marla, that you've shared all of those with Texas Ag Science Education and the FFA. And you've done so, and in doing so, you've planted trees. And what do we say about leadership? The essence of leadership is to plant trees under whose shade we may never sit. And the things that y'all do at the fairs and expos are planting incredible seeds, mighty oaks that are going to grow in communities and business and in industry and government relations, and the list goes on and on and on. So please share with your members how much we appreciate what you do. And we appreciate you taking time with us today. You get one last question. It's the last question we ask everybody. It's a fun question. What's the best concert you've ever been to?
Well, this one is a toss-up, I have to tell you, because my very first concert ever in my entire life was to see the Doobie Brothers in 1976. And I would go forever, and you just never forget that. But I have to say, probably the best concert experience I've had in recent years was to see Little Big Town in Virginia in October of 21, just about a year ago, in a small brand new performing arts center. And it was absolutely awesome.
Little Big Town. That's great. And the Doobie Brothers, I mean, that's a classic.
Absolutely, it is.
I had some.
But then, it's, now that you've got me thinking, we could go on and ever, because then there's also Hugh Jackman and his one-man show in Madison Square Garden, and I can't forget that.
You saw that?
Yeah.
Tom Ziegler. That was Tom Ziegler's, by the way.
Yeah.
That's cool. Very good.
Yep.
Well, Marla, thank you again. We appreciate you. And I appreciate you, and I know a lot of our teachers and our students do as well. So keep doing a good job. You're making a positive difference, and it is noticed. To all the listeners out there, thank you for joining us. That's what the Growing Our Future podcast is about, this right here. If you want to know what the future is, grow it. You got to plant the seeds. You got to take care of them. And you got to get out on the other side and be that harvest of goodwill, that harvest of positivity, that harvest that makes a difference for the people that are going to follow in our footsteps. And until we see you down the road at the next podcast, everybody be safe, go out and do something extraordinary, make somebody's life better, and help us continue to grow the future that we want, a future that makes our homes, our communities, our state, and our country the best place to live, work, and raise our children. Thank you all for being here.